Morning, everyone. I'm going to do a quick intro. Welcome to our focus day on student support. This hour, we feature a spotlight on student support, doing the basics. This is a brunch in basics. I am Catherine O'Hare. I am your moderator today. Please note today's presentation is being partially recorded. Later sessions today are going to be fully recorded. This one's a little more communicative and interactive. The presentation will last about 50 minutes, or the collaboration, I should say. All participants should be currently muted, but if there are interactive portions, we invite you to unmute. Feel free to use your video if you're comfortable. You can ask questions out loud or use the chat. Please feel free to comment and share your perspective and knowledge too. We have a raise your hand feature in Teams if you would like to utilize that. And I'll be moderating the chat throughout the presentation. Closed captioning is available on Teams in the options menu. I will post an evaluation survey in the chat. So please send that so we can, or submit that information so we can know what you want to see in the future, what worked, what could we do better. This topic came out of people saying that we need to talk, let's do a deep dive on student support topics. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. It's my pleasure to introduce our lead presenter today, Shannon Irie, my teammate. Um, we're both with Office of Sponsored Programs and Training Information Coordinators. Do you want to say anything more, Shannon?
I think you said it all. But hi, Shannon Irie. And today we are going to be focusing mainly on student support that goes on to sponsored projects. But there are some topics that we're going to cover today that will also cover just student support and our students in general. But our main focus is going to be anything that is on sponsored projects. So again, today we want to talk about getting to know some differences in terms, different types of students, graduate students mainly, that go onto our sponsored projects. We want to become familiar with terms that surround student support. We always use these a lot and just kind of throw them out and just assume that everyone knows what this means. But I can tell you that when I started at the university, I came from private industry. And the very first time that I encountered someone talking to me about a GRA, I had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. While I had attended a university, I was unaware that there were some students that get paid for their education. So anyways, just wanting to make sure that everyone has some familiar terms, because we're also going to be using these in the next two sessions that we're going to be having. At 1 o'clock, we're going to be covering fellowships. And then at 2 o'clock, we're going to be covering training grants. So also want to kind of look over some resources that we have available on these topics for the student support across campus. So it's not just sponsored programs. We'll be looking at the graduate school and financial aid. And then also we want to open it up for some questions. We have Kim Melville-Smith here today to help field questions, our resident expert. So hopefully we'll get into some good questions. So I'm going to start out with assistantships. We have three main types of assistantships, which I'll get to next. But the thing about assistantships here at the university is that there are some differences about assistantships. One, these are an employment relationship. They're paid a salary. Their work hours are tied to their effort that they put on a project. They're tracked in eCert. These are paid by the institution, so paid by CSU, and also work for these type of employees benefits the institution. So they'll have a relationship where someone tells them what they should be working on, and that benefit is coming back to the institution. We have three main types of assistantships. We have a GRA, a GTA, and a GSA. Generally, it's our GRAs that are going to be on our sponsored projects. We may have limited situations where a GTA may be on a sponsored project, and that's only if it's written into the statement of work and it's part of the work. And then we have a GSA, which I've never had to deal with much in my role at the institution or here at CSU, but that's also a different. So GRAs, they are going to work directly with a faculty member. They're going to work directly with a PI, a researcher. They're going to be funded by a grant, a cooperative agreement, or a contract possibly. They can also work on a department account, right? They could work on 22 accounts, 64 accounts, etc. But normally they are fully funded by a department. Then we have our GTAs who are working in the classrooms and helping out with classroom material. And then the GSA, like I said, which is a graduate student assistant who work in non-academic units. And again, they're funded by the institution. So then we're going to talk about fellows and trainees, students that are on fellowships and trainees. Fellowship and trainee students are paid via a stipend. Their work hours are not tied to the effort that they put into their project. They're not tracked in eCert. They're sometimes paid directly to the individual. So sometimes the institution doesn't even see the funds for the stipends that come in. But sometimes those are paid directly to the institution, and then we do pay those out still on a 5-3 account. But the main difference is that the work that these students are doing, these fellows and trainees are doing, benefit the individual. They're not to benefit the unit. They can benefit the university, but the main point of this is that they are benefiting the training, the education, the furthering of a career for a fellow or a trainee. When we have a fellow or a trainee, then we are calling these in our HR system a GRA pre-doc. Again, they're working independently. They will generally have a faculty member or who is a mentor or an advisor to them. They are funded by an award of some sort, either a grant, cooperative agreement, or contract, like we said. And then we have this GRA pre-doc object code, which will not charge fringe to an award. So prior to having this pre-doc category, our fellows and trainees, and this is a long time ago, by the way, were just set up as GRAs in our system. But fringe is generally not allowed on our fellowships or our training grants. And so we had to come up with an object code so that that fringe wouldn't be charged to our training grants. So that's where that GRA pre-doc object code came in. And then we do have another classification of students that are sometimes on our sponsored projects, and these are our student hourlies. Again, these are they're paid bi-weekly, set up in time clock plus, so they have to log in and out. They're tied to hours, and they're tracked in eCert as well. But they're paid through, and they're also paid through the institution. So while their compensation is allowed on sponsored projects, any associated tuition, differential tuition, mandatory fees are not. And student hourlies can be either undergrads or graduate students. Okay, so again, we're just going to be covering some very typical vernacular surrounding students, and we want to define what a year is, because it is important to define what a year is, because we have an academic year, which is 9 months. We have our summer, which is 3 months. So that makes up a full year, right? 9 plus 3, last time I checked, was 12. But then we also have CSU defines a fiscal year, and we have a calendar year. So I've put all those definitions in there. But it's important to know what the academic year is when we have students on our projects, because we need to be setting up the expenses that go with a student correctly. So when they're set up on an academic year, we want to make sure that all the expenses from tuition, et cetera, follow that student on those projects in the proportion that they're working on those projects. So, and also during the academic year, student on assistantships, fellowships, and training grants are typically paid 50% of their FTE salary, with the expectation that the other 50% of their time during the academic year is going to be dedicated to classes and coursework. Students on assistantships and fellowships may also be paid in the summer months, and this can range from unit to unit. It can be from zero, basically, so some units don't pay any summer during the summer, where some units pay 100% of an FTE. It depends on the unit that they work on. It depends on their offer letter, or the terms and conditions of the wards that they support. So this can be all over the place. And it also, we have to also make sure that we understand that international students have some special parameters around them because of their visas. International students are not allowed to work more than 50% FTE during the academic year. So another important thing to remember is, what is a full-time student? This becomes really important when we get into our fellowship and training grants, because some of them require that our students are a full-time student as defined by our institution. So here at CSU, a full-time student is defined to be 9 credit hours. So let's make sure that we understand the difference between being a student and being a GRA, because they're tied together, but they're not exactly the same thing, right? So in order to be a GRA, you must only need to be enrolled in 1 credit, which is different than being a full-time student. So the two things are different, and it gets really hard when you're managing a 5-3 project, because a lot of times we know what their FTE is and what projects they're being paid on, but we don't always know how they're enrolled at the institution as a student, because those two things are sometimes different in units, sometimes they're the same. But I know that I had a hard time with my graduate students making sure that when they were on fellowships or when they were on something, that they were that I knew what credit hours or how many credit hours that they were enrolled in. Sometimes I never found out until tuition would hit an account. So those are always fun. Okay, so we have some other
Wait,
costs.
Kim has her hand
Yeah.
up.
Can you go back? Yeah, to the side.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just wanted to clarify that full-time student, 9 credits, is full-time graduate student. It is a
Yes.
different level for undergraduate students.
Yes.
The majority of this presentation is referencing graduate students. So just wanted to clarify.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have some other costs that are associated with GRAs and GRA pre-docs. Again, I'm not talking too much about GTAs and GSAs because that's not what our focus is, but we have some other terms, and one of them is tuition remission. And again, we throw out these terms a lot thinking that everyone knows what they mean, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Tuition remission is basically when the institution pays all or a part of a student's tuition and or fees. So that's all that means, is that we're paying a portion of those fees for a student. Then we have graduate differential. Sorry, I'm having to move my stuff so I can see my notes. Kim's face was plastered over my notes. So we have differential tuition. So we have some programs that charge an extra amount of tuition for their programs. Differential tuition is generally allowed on our 5-3 projects, and I'm putting it generally because there are some times when it is not. The programs that currently have differential tuition are engineering, business, natural science, and as well as there's some interdisciplinary programs such as the School of Advanced Materials Discovery, the graduate degree program in ecology, and cell and molecular biology. So Doesn't mean that other programs in the future might not add differential tuition, because they may, but there is an additional amount of tuition that is charged per student per credit. Sometimes per credit hour. I'm not going to say all of them are the exact same. Some of them are a flatter fee.
Shannon, I wanted to go ahead and put some clarifying on that statement as well. And
Yeah.
actually, there are other programs that have differential tuition. The programs that you listed are the ones that can be charged to sponsored projects.
Gotcha.
And the rationale behind that is because the department or college has to cover those costs for all graduate assistantships, regardless of whether they're a GRA, GTA, or a GSA. And so those are the programs or units that have decided that they will cover it for everybody. So like Warner College has differential tuition expenses, but they have not agreed to cover that cost for everybody. So it's not allowable on sponsored projects for that unit. So I think that's the key thing, is it's got to be an all or nothing. We can't just charge differential tuition to sponsored projects.
Perfect. Thank you. And you know what? Learned something new today. Always got to learn something new every day, right? So again, another term that we're going to be talking about are mandatory graduate student fees. So these, as of this January 2023, mandatory student fees for all graduate students are being partially paid by CSU. It's coming in a phased approach. Started this spring semester 2023. GRAs will have 50% of their fees paid by CSU and be responsible for the other 50%. For the academic year coming up, 2024-20, that correct? Is it 2024-2025? They will have, so it's 50% all the way through until next year that we're paying half, 50% of the fees. Then 2024-2025 will have 75% of their fees paid by CSU and they'll be still responsible for 25% of their fees. And by academic year 2025-26, 100% of their fees will be covered by CSU. Mandatory fees are currently general fees, university technology fees, university facility fees, and university alternative transportation fees. So this phased approach, we will be seeing that units and sponsor projects will be starting to pick up these fees for the students starting this next fall. And that'll be the 50%.
If it was budgeted and approved.
If it was, yep, we're going to get to that in the FAQs, but yes, if it was budgeted and approved. So I'm sure there's going to be some questions about that.
We do have a question about how much are those fees right now?
We'll get to that because I actually have an Excel sheet on the website. I don't have that in front of me at the moment, but it is on our. Okay. So getting into the weeds just a little bit on this. We also are paying benefits, and I put the X in the middle of that because we're paying it on, more than just GRAs, but again, our focus is GRAs. But benefits are paid to these students if they're enrolled in at least 5 credits, and that they're paid at least 25% FTE, 10 hours a week, and which has to be equal or greater than the graduate assistant minimum. And that's set every single year, that minimum graduate assistantship amount. So, and then the benefits that are included for all of them is going to be the health insurance contribution and the graduate research assistantship tuition premium program. Man, that's a mouthful. So for those who are unfamiliar with what the tuition premium is, that is that the graduate school is picking up the difference between in-state tuition and out-of-state tuition for graduate students. And for students that are employed as 50% FTE GRAs, the 20 hours a week, the graduate school will pay the tuition premium difference in full. For students who are employed in capacities less than 50%, the graduate school will pay for a prorated amount of that TP. And this benefit is also paid to the GRA pre-docs, as well as the health insurance contribution. This decision was made somewhere around 2017-ish, 2018-ish, that that GRA pre-doc object code needed to still have that when the object code was created to begin with, they didn't get these benefits. And we didn't want fellowship or trainees who've gone out and are getting this work and are doing wonderful things for the university to be what's the word I'm looking for? To be to not get the benefits. Yeah, penalized. Thank you, Kim. You'd be penalized for the same and get the same benefits as everyone else. So GRA pre-docs also get the health insurance contribution and the TP paid on their behalf. Fringe is not taken from the 5-3 projects that they work on, but it is charged to a pool, a fringe pool, and so these benefits are paid on their behalf. Okay, so those were just kind of the definitions that we were going to go over today. Are there any other questions? Looks like Kat put in the chat, she put the Excel spreadsheet that we have that has the mandatory student fees, the current ones. This will be updated when we know what the new current mandatory fees are going to be for next semester. Start for the next fiscal year, or academic year, I should say. Do we have any questions about, before we head on to looking at some resources? Okay. So I just want you to see that we're going to have resources here. And I'm going to stop sharing this because I'm going to start sharing some of these resources a little bit because I want everyone to know where things are located.
So feel free, if you have a second screen, get a browser up. We're gonna do a little scavenger hunt kind of around the website.
Share the new.
Yeah, we posted a blog when the mandatory fee news came out. So that's in the chat. And then we also have a web page that we've started dedicating to the student support topics and the common questions that have been sent in to the teams. So that's a page where you can find FAQs. I think that's one of the ones we're going to look at today.
Okay. So as this comes up. Okay, so one of the first places that I'm going to go is I'm going to go to the graduate school. So the graduate school, by the way, has a lot of great information. It tells us on their page in particular about assistantships, tells us about the difference between GTAs, GRAs, and GSAs, like what we just went through, the tuition benefit, and has a lot of good information in there. So if you haven't gone to the graduate school and perused their website and you have students, it really is a great place to go and look. So the next place I'm going to go to is to our financial aid. And financial aid is where we have what our current tuition rates are for undergraduate, but again, these aren't going on our sponsored projects, so it's not something we need to look at. But it does have our graduate student tuition rates for graduate and for the differential tuition, and also for vet med. Also then has all the different fees on there. So again, financial aid is a great place. Financial aid also has, well, places talks about student employment, so student hourlies. So then on our website, I just want to show you a couple of resources. So in our training tools and resources, we have a couple of things. If you go to the on-demand learning, we have a couple of things. First, we have a quick clip. Over here, we have the quick clip that is assistant salary versus fellowship stipend. This is a great quick clip. Yes, Catherine's laughing at me because the other day, I think it took me, what, 10 tries to get that out? Quick clip. There we go. And just added, we have on My Learning, we have just added a student support on sponsored projects module that can be done in My Learning. These are really great resources. If you're new to the university, if you're new to having students on projects, if you have a new faculty or a new PI who just needs some get their head around what having students on their projects means, all of these are really great resources. The other thing that we have built out is we have this guidance page. And in the general guidance, we have another page on student support on sponsored projects. In here, we have a matrix with, again, the appointment type and some differences on what you can and cannot do or what is on those types. We have a whole section on the mandatory graduate fees, and we built out FAQs. So these FAQs are kind of where I wanted to look at. And then we've also added a whole other set of FAQs just on student support on sponsored projects. Does anyone have anything specific they want to look at? But I wanted to kind of open up a couple of these FAQs just to look at so that we can talk about them. Anyone have any questions? Anything? I know we all have questions about the mandatory student fees. These are new. Now's your time. You got Kim here, and she can give you some really good information. Okay. Well, let's go over a couple of hot topics on these, right? So let's open up the FAQ. Can mandatory student fees be paid on a sponsored project? Yes, they can, but they had to have been budgeted for at proposal stage. Let's see, what's another good one here. Can we rebudget on existing awards to pay for mandatory student fees if we did not request them at proposal stage? And mandatory student fees cannot be paid on projects that were not requested and justified at the proposal stage. So we're having this phased in approach. So I'm hoping that y'all were including mandatory fees on anything that you proposed for starting this spring. And at least it's only 50% of those fees. So to begin with, and then we'll go to the 75 and 100, and that will hopefully get everyone geared up on their projects to be able to cover those fees when they become 100%. Is there any question on mandatory fees?
Hey, Shannon, this is Adam. Just
Yeah.
a comment. Just a comment.
Yeah.
This is awesome. The resources you guys have up here. So this is great. I like it.
Thanks, Adam. Okay. So just looking at the other support on sponsored projects and FAQs. So again, here's the differential tuition that we talked about. So these are the current ones that we are able to pay differential tuition. And then, another hot topic is always, what happens if I have a GRA and they're paid on 2 projects and one of those projects won't allow tuition? What do I do? Well, tuition and fees need to be allocated based upon the effort that they put on the project. So if you have a project that will not allow tuition, then and if your department is going to be paying that, it needs to go on a non-sponsored project. These are the new ones that have come in here recently, so that's why I'm kind of looking over these FAQs a little bit. Another one is my GRA has been doing extra work and I'd like to pay them a bonus. How do I do that? Well, GRAs can have an increased FTE. Now, the caveat to that again is international students, because a lot of international students, not a lot, international students are not allowed to be paid over 50% during the academic year based upon their visa restrictions. But other GRAs could possibly, their FTE could be bumped up during the academic year. If you want to pay them a little additional for more work that they're doing. But just an FYI, supplemental pay is not allowed on GRA assignments. So they're not allowed to have that. So, and again, this concept in eCert, why aren't we tracking the fellowships? Well, we need to get our head around the fact that people who are on a GRA pre-doc for a fellowship or a training grant are doing their own work, and therefore we're not allowed to necessarily allowed to track their hours. Their effort is based upon what they're doing for themselves. So we're not tracking that in eCert. If anyone has any good FAQs or has questions that keep coming up on a regular basis, we would love to add to these FAQs, because I think that this is really good information for the entire campus to have. So if there's any suggestions for things that keep coming up, or if you keep having burning questions about something, please shoot us a line. We're happy to answer and get this up so that we can share this resource with everybody. Okay. So any questions? I hope that we would have some question answer here, y'all. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Kim, do you have anything clarifying?
Not at this moment. Nope. I took care of it while you were going.
Great. Appreciate that.
Okay, I'm going to pause recording so that we have open room to discuss and ask our more specific or burning questions.